Good morning, I'm Isabella Fagiani. We're continuing our series called My Spirit Abides with You, based on the passage in which God's people are reassured that God's Spirit abides with them post-exile in Haggai. So hear these words today from a similar time period found in the book of Ezra. When the 7th month came and the Israelites were in the towns, the people gathered together in Jerusalem. Then Yeshua, son of Jozadak, with his fellow priests, and Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, with his kin, set out to build the altar of the God of Israel, to offer burnt offerings on it, as prescribed in the law of Moses, the man of God. They set up the altar on its foundation because they were in dread of the neighboring peoples, and they offered burnt offerings upon it to the Lord morning and evening. And they kept the festival of booths, as prescribed, and offered the daily burnt offerings by number according to the ordinance as required for each day. And after that, the regular burnt offerings and offerings at the new moon and at all the sacred festivals of the Lord, and the offerings of everyone who made a free will offering to the Lord. From the first day of the 7th month, they began to offer burnt offerings to the Lord, but the foundation of the temple of the Lord was not yet laid. So they gave money to the masons and the carpenters, and food and drink and oil to the Sidonians and to the Tyrians, to bring cedar trees from Lebanon to the sea, to Joppa, according to the grant that they had from King Cyrus of Persia. In this book of Ezra, the Israelites have returned to Israel following the Babylonian exile, and now comes the task of returning to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple. They begin by rebuilding the altar, the place where they can offer their burnt offerings to God, just as God instructed their ancestors through Moses many years ago. I wonder about the conversations that the Israelites had as the work to rebuild the temple got started. Do we build in exactly the same place? Shall we make the altar bigger or smaller? What about new cushions on the pews? What's the total cost of this project, and how long is it going to take? These are just a few of the questions I imagine that get aimed at Jeshua and Zerubbabel as they begin building the altar again. They begin building without all of the answers, and they just get into it. In these questions, we can hear there's curiosity, there's a bit of excitement. We have the chance to do something new. And there's also a bit of fear. How long will it take? How much will it cost? And a bit of grief. This is always going to be different than the temple we knew that our ancestors knew that was destroyed. Despite those questions that probably existed around Jeshua and Zerubbabel, they rebuild anyways. The altar of the Israelites for their God is rebuilt first. And they don't build the altar in a new place or in a different way, but they actually build the altar on top of the foundation of the old one. They build the place first where they can offer their offerings to God. Even before the foundation of the temple is laid, they realize it is important to give thanks that they are even here. And once that altar is built, the focus of this passage changes. It suddenly becomes filled with all the ways that the people of Israel offered themselves to God. There were probably still quite a few questions, but the people turned to God with their offering anyways. With the altar built, the people could participate in the festival of the booths. This is a festival which celebrates God's presence with them in their years in the wilderness as they wandered, waiting to get to the promised land. And now they get to celebrate that with new meaning, recognizing that God was with them throughout the exile, and God is with them as they return to Jerusalem as well. After the festival of booths, it continues. There are regular burnt offerings, offerings at the new moon. There are offerings day and night, and there are all these people who make free will offerings to the Lord just because. The people continue giving in gratitude for God's faithful presence, for worship returning to this sacred place even before the foundation of the temple is laid. As we embark on our capital campaign, there are understandably a lot of questions to be asked. What's the construction timetable? Will our group be able to meet on this day or that day? When will we worship in the sanctuary versus the fellowship hall? How can we blend the old and the new in these design changes? How will we make sure that our space is just as welcoming and hospitable as we've always known as we enact these changes? The list goes on as it should, and I imagine the list went on with Jeshua and Zerubbabel as they got started building the altar. But Jeshua and Zerubbabel knew that God promised that their spirit abides with them. So they build the altar anyways, right on top of the foundation of the old one. That promise is one that we know too. We've experienced it time and time again that God abides with this faith community too. We see it in chili cook-offs for youth conferences. We see it in variety shows with performers of every age from 3 to 70. We see it in people who go and visit the people who might otherwise be forgotten, in prayer shawls knitted, in small group conversation. God's Spirit abides in all of those places and so many more. God's Spirit abides with us here. And so with that promise, even without the foundation of the temple laid, we too can give. Giving thanks for the God who we have known already through this community. We can give thanks to our God without knowing all of the details. We too can worship grateful for this place, even in the uncertainty, because we know that God's Spirit abides with us. So come with your questions. Come with an open mind to one of our information sessions. There's one this upcoming Sunday right after 11 a.m. worship. It'll happen in the fellowship hall, and there will even be finger food so you won't be hungry. And there's the option to go on a facility tour afterwards to see the different places where we are hopeful to make improvements. And if that doesn't work for you, there's still a chance on Wednesday, February 24th to join in on Zoom for another information session. Hear from Hughes, who we are working with through this process, and hear from the Presbyterian Community Center as we do our best to support their capital campaign as we raise funds for our building too. In Ezra, even when the foundation isn't built and the people are still giving all of their burnt offerings to God, the passage ends that they're still giving away their money. They're giving money to the masons and the carpenters, and food and drink and oil to those who are helping them. There is a spirit of immense generosity that comes from the Israelites as they embark on this journey. They trust in that promise of God, even though no stone is yet laid down. God has been with them this whole time, and God's Spirit abides with them as they have returned. So as we make our way through this capital campaign and as we journey closer to Commitment Sunday, may we hold on to that promise that God gives to each and every one of us too. That God's Spirit abides with us, not just personally, but God's Spirit abides with us as a faith community. May we be like Jeshua and Zerubbabel, making a way for people to provide their offering to God anyways, even before a stone is laid, trusting in that promise together.